Do-Rag Vince McMahon. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Where were you on that? Because I see a picture randomly lately of you standing over on top, and there's like Vince and his do-rag looking up at you as the ECW champion. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, but I mean, I have a very balanced feeling on that because I have pros and cons that I feel at the time when especially when I was in that competitive state of mind of being in the dressing room and feeling like the writers are just fucking with me and all you go all this stuff when you're right in there. For me, total different state of mind than I have now with this happy time in my life. So at the time, I really looked at it defensively from ECW. I thought he's making a mockery of ECW. I thought he might have even brought ECW back just to destroy it. Because he didn't like the fans chanting EC Dub. He took credit for it, said he trained them to chant EC Dub during the shows by putting out the ECW DVD. And then I was like, wow, man, this dude's crazy. Maybe he brought it back just to completely wipe. And they did completely wipe out the extreme theme to it and made it, my refs have to have credibility, Rob. So it was like, just like any other show, except they put way less into it, way less budget, way less advertising. The house shows at that time, were just the old ECW crappy arenas that from the mid '90s. They were redoing those, and we would sometimes film like after SmackDown on the SmackDown night, and there was some kind of weird way that we were getting paid off a split of their gate, which really wasn't fair, but I guess ECW wasn't. Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, in the end, supposedly all the numbers iron out, whatever. But at the same time, one, I thought Vince looked really cool in the do-rag. I did. I loved it. I thought that was cool because he's all buff in the black the black shirt, whatever, with the sleeves looked like they were, I don't know what you call that, but sweatsuit shirt.
Yeah.
I thought, and I loved working with him. I had a match that was a 3 against 1. I don't know if you remember that or not. It's probably where that picture came from.
I take it on Umaga, Shane McMahon, and Vince McMahon.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. I mean, something like that, when I think back, makes me think maybe I was considered in a much higher position than it felt like at the time, because that wouldn't normally be something they would do with like a mid-carder or whatever, and sometimes I think of it like that, like, well, that's really cool. I got to work with Vince and Shano and Umaga in that moment, so there's that as well.
Well, it's interesting you brought up, though, the gate information about the fact that if that's true, that they were splitting the gate with both sides of brands, ECW and SmackDown, that sounds awful. Now, I also went to those SmackDown tapings where ECW was taped live at 10 o'clock at night. And so I would be there. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, 10 o'clock happens and all the kids and families leave because it's 10 o'clock and SmackDown's over. They saw Batista, they saw Fit Finley, whatever. They don't know. Some people don't even know ECW's taped on after. So I was there when the crowds would dip out and there would still be people there, but not as much. So to me, as an ECW wrestler, that must have been a little daunting. Be like, okay, well, we should go on first, not last.
If you add up all these little thoughts, like you just mentioned, add it to the fact that we were brought in on WWE's television as heels, and everyone was trained to boo us before they split us off to our own show. And then all the crazy ideas that they wanted to implement that was a daily fight for Paul, all of that stuff, when you add it all up, it does seem like it was maybe brought in to destroy. That's definitely a defendable theory anyway. And when I talk about the stuff they wanted to implement, Paul would tell me, like, this before a sci-fi TV show, Paul would, especially when we just started, Paul would tell me Paul would say they have 9 things they want to put in that are really horrible. We can't let them. I'll get them to fold on 6. We might have a problem with 3 of them. And so that's where there was like a mummy or
Yeah,
whatever. And
zombie and
some
yeah.
of that stuff was the stuff he wasn't able to get cut out because that's their job. They all meet and and I'll squabble over the tables about why they each person should push what and who they want to push and what for. Yeah.
Yeah, that ECW, when we just now we're talking about it, a lot of things that come into my brain right now about it. With again, the being on after was strange. Yeah, being as heels was strange, and then having you have on the sci-fi zombies, it was very interesting how it was kind of like perceived because suddenly it was like, oh, we have our wrestlers, but oh, we need Big Show over here. Like, oh, we need Kurt Angle over here. And those great people, great characters, great names. But like, I never heard of a fan base being like, Big Show's now on Tuesdays. I'm going to watch Tuesday. Like, there are names obviously on Raw and SmackDown that could have been brought over to actually bring that person's audience with them, but they chose the characters that the ECW hardcore fans clearly were never going to accept a Big Show, or I love Bobby Lashley just as much as well, but he was not the brand. It's like naming your show Girls Gone Wild and you go to watch it, it's about cooking. You'd be like, I'm sorry, what is this? Why is the show named this if it's not going to be this?
Yeah, their agenda was definitely to change it, I think, from the beginning. I think
And killing it.
dilute it,
Yeah.
yeah, dissipate what it stands for. And besides having the wrestlers come over and become ECW wrestlers, there was also way too many just like cameos. Like
Yeah.
they would have matches with like 2 SmackDown guys wrestling on the ECW show.
Oh yeah.
For
And the
no
Hammerstein
reason.
Ballroom. Big Show took on Batista inside the Hammerstein Ballroom. That's the night
Yeah,
CM Punk makes his ECW debut. Everyone
yeah,
goes crazy for CM Punk. They boo Batista and Big Show out of the building for exactly what you were saying. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like that,
no,
when you brought it up, that is one of those. I'm sorry, what's going on? And then more about killing things. We've heard stories over the years of Vince just buying things just to like screw with them. Oh, I'm going to bring in this person and make him wear polka dots. And I'm going to call $1 Million Man's servant Virgil, because that's Dusty Rhodes' real name, because we're in a battle right now. Like, these things aren't fake. It just seems that like when you start talking about conspiracies, people think you're crazy. But like when you bring up all these facts over all the years, they're not coincidences. These things are on purpose. Killing ECW, killing that name, killing the chance. I feel like you are actually onto something.
yeah. And even so, though, seeing the bigger picture like I do now, I'm glad that Vince brought it back, and that I got to show some ECW on WWE's stage where a
Yeah.
lot more people got to see our style, because it was cool for a while before I got busted. I had some great matches with Bob Holly
Oh,
and Sabu, even Big Show. We had a lot of
yeah.
great matches, and
Took on
who else?
Test.
Test. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I was suspended when it was really going downhill, and I couldn't be around to fight for it, because I would always be in Vince's ear trying to give him my thoughts before that. And then while I was suspended, I was seeing that I didn't understand why they were polluting the talent pool by having SmackDown guys that were going to remain SmackDown guys just on the show. It didn't make sense to me. I think Matt Hardy was one of them. I think he was on the show, but I don't think he was ECW. And I might be wrong about him, but it seemed like him and
Yeah.
Kane had a match, and I was like, what? Like, I don't like, that's going to confuse everybody so much.
Yeah.
And they're already not going to understand what ECW is because of all these changes you're making. And then once Vince decided to add rules to every match, except for one match a night, that's what he's going to do. One night, one match is going to be Extreme Rules. All the other ones, we're going to just be SmackDown.
I'm not even sure people know that NXT actually was the precursor to ECW. One night, Vince just walked out and said, ECW is dead. And on next week, something new will happen. And then NXT made its debut. Same place, same time, just called NXT. Like, I don't think people even know that, like, ECW was swallowed up by NXT, and that's the history of beginning of NXT, which I could talk to you about ECW forever. ECW, how did you even end up in ECW?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but I started in ECW in 1993.
When it was Eastern Championship Wrestling?
Right. So I was being trained at that time by Gino Caruso up in Parsippany. Tommy Cairo was going up there, and I was a student. I only had a few matches. I was wrestling as Damian Stone, and Tommy Cairo was up there, and he asked me, he goes, I met this guy, Todd Gordon. He's running a show in Philadelphia. It's at some fair for special needs or whatever. He's like, he told me to bring someone down to work with. So he's like, you want to go? And at that time, I was coming. Yeah, that was great. I'm finally going to do a show. It was probably my fourth or fifth, but I do these small, school shows. I was brand new. So I go down there, and me and Tommy Cairo have a match and this outside event. And we met Todd, and he's like, he liked what we did. He's like, hey, I want you. And then that time he was also running. This was just like a special thing he did because he had the ring. That's where I met Tony Stetson, Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody. That's all those. Those were all the guys in Eastern Championship Wrestling. So Todd started booking us in the Chestnut Cabaret and the place on Market Street and all those little bars that he used to run out there. And we were on TV in like Sports Channel Philadelphia, and so I wrestled there. So now I knew Todd Gordon, and I got an opportunity in 1994 to go to Japan and work for UWFI. So I left there. So I wrestled for Todd for 2 years as Damian Stone. Nothing to do with Little Guido. Nobody even knew what that was yet. I went to Japan. When I came home, it was like the end of 95, beginning of 96, and Tommy Dreamer and Taz were doing and Paul Heyman were doing Eastern Championship Wrestling. It turned into Extreme now. I didn't know this because I was in Japan for like a year and a half, so I didn't know, and we didn't get the TV out there. And now I know Tommy Dreamer and Taz because we all started different schools, but around the same time, and I worked for a lot of promotions with those guys. And weren't doing jobs for IWCCW. So I got to know Tommy and Tab. So when I came home, I gave Tommy a call because he was, I heard that he was, helped Paul with the writing, the booking, and whatever he was doing. And I knew Tom forever. And he's like, hey, man, come down to Lost Battalion Hall in Queens next week. We're doing TV. He goes, I'll introduce you to Paul Heyman. And I went down there, and that's when I was wrestling, like I said, Damian Stone. And he introduced me to him, and he actually, to a comment to me. And when I went up to him, I said, hey, how you doing? I'm Damian Stone. And he goes, I know who you are, because Paul probably did watch. He knew what went on. I wrestled all over New York, on the independent circuit. At that time, I was wrestling in Japan, so I was in the dirt sheets by the time I met Paul. So he probably did see me around and did know who I am, but he wasn't. I just wanted to be respectful. I didn't think he would have remembered me or knew me. I didn't even know he knew me. And that was it. And then as I started wrestling for him as Damian Stone, and every day, every weekend, he'll be like, "Oh, you remind me of a Joe Pesci. You'd be short, short but tempered but feisty." And then one day, after like a month and a half, he comes up. He goes, "You're gonna be Little Guido." He goes, "You're Little Guido." He goes, "You're JT Smith's cousin." And we went out in Queens, and we did the thing where he came out, and I came out, and he got hit in the head with a frying pan and thought he was my cousin. That's all those started. So the question was, when did I start with ECW? I actually started before Taz and Tommy and all those guys in 1993 with Tommy Cairo, who they know too, Tommy Cairo very well. But just the way things work.
Yeah, of course. And so Little Guido is born, and this whole new revolution of ECW. So your style, though, in the ring, I felt like it was like the opposite of what, people, if you heard of ECW in the 90s, you thought of chairs, barbed wire, fire, thumbtacks. But you were out there, you were wrestling, you were putting on clinics. So was there a problem with trying to go into steel cages and steel chairs, and you didn't want to do that?
No, well, no, I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to do that because New Jack, if you look all over tables, through off the balcony, and me and Tracy Smothers won the titles from New Jack and Coronas at the ECW arena, and like the us versus the Dudleys versus maybe the Pitbulls, and we were getting hit with all kinds of stuff there, all kinds of. So I know I've done that there before, but then it came a time where. It's funny, and people always say that when we would do house shows, there was a lot more wrestling on there. There was like one match of the craziness. But when you watch the TV, Paulie would show little clips of little wrestling matches like Dean Malenko and Eddie at that time and stuff. And then he would show mostly hardcore stuff on TV. So we weren't doing that on all the house shows. That was being done in one match. We weren't doing that all over, but I understand what they're saying. When you see it on TV, that's all you see.
Yeah.
We tape TV, that's what we do, And then it kind of changed going, as time went on and became a little more wrestling on the show. When Tracy and Tommy came in and they would do the old style wrestling. So we would put our matches on and we were mostly wrestling matches. And then when Tracy and Tommy left and then he brought in Super Crazy and Tajiri, who were great wrestlers. And, and then I think he was starting with Rey Mysterio around then too. Like Rey was here for a while when I was here. So Paul was actually bringing the luchas in, and the smart marks knew who these people were, So and that's how the wrestling started being on the show too, and that's how the fans gave super respect for guys like Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko when they were doing those matches, and when he did his farewell match with So yeah, I always ended up with a wrestling thing, but I did those matches. I've been through tables numerous times. I've been hit with chairs. Paul Mahoney, one time we worked with him for 3 months. Me and Tracy were dying my elbows because towards the end I was bringing my elbows up and he broke both my Bertha sacks. Not that he meant it, but I couldn't take it to the head anymore. So my elbows had all these big bubble. We'd have to stick needles in them. They're called Bertha sacks. So you go to put your elbow on the table, it would like you hit your funny bone. So I transitioned, thank God, into regular wrestling matches when the big guys left me and I had then they brought in Tony Mamaluke and we were wrestling Mikey Whipwreck, Tajiri and all those guys. So
Big Sally Graziano.
Big Sal, he was great for me, especially when after Tracy and Tommy left, it was just me and they were using me there as like a cruiserweight versus Tajiri and Super Crazy, Jerry Lynn at the time, and I was wrestling Rob Van Dam for the TV title from Chicago. And then having Big Sal with me since I was small was always a help because he would always get involved at the right times. So, he helped me keep moving in ECW.
And just incredible. That name right there, before we even get to ECW and all your matches, just incredible. Who created that name?
It was not me, and believe it or not, it was not Paul Heyman. It was one of Paul's younger wrestlers. He went to the wrestling school, and he was actually on Ring Crew. And later on, he ended up wrestling as Bilvis Wesley, the Elvis character in ECW. Short stint, but he came up with the character for himself. And Paul paid him $500. He came up with the name Just Incredible, not the character, but the name. He saw it on a bumper sticker or something. And Paul said, I don't see you with this name, but I'll pay you $500, but I'll give the name to someone else. So he came up with it, gave it to Paul, and Paul gave it to me. I guess he'd had that name for a little bit. And the rest I just kind of, just did myself. I was just trying to be, a little bit of Stone Cold, a little bit of Razor, a little bit of everything, just kind of inventing myself. And the character just kind of slowly came to me. I didn't plan anything. Nothing was predetermined. I just kind of did most of it out there, except, and the name and the catchphrase and all that just kind of slowly built,
Yeah, the presentation of you originally coming in and pretty much taking out, I guess you'd call them the ECW legends. That was kind of your thing when you first showed up. You were taking out all of these established ECW originals, and here you are coming in. And I'll be honest, I didn't even know that you were Aldo Montoya. Seeing the person you were and the person you have become, night and day. No one could have put you two up and go, I think that's the same person. So the idea of you coming in with this strong push, whose idea again is this? Because again, you're before this Aldo Montoya, great character, but now you're completely opposite of what you once were. Like, who is designing this? Who is getting all this going? Because it's a whole different ballgame.
I mean, I have to give that to Paul Heyman. I mean, especially the storylines. I mean, and the storylines certainly helped. Because the earlier onset of Just Incredible in 97 when I debuted, as it matured into 98 with the Impact Players, and then my 99 and 2000 when I had my title run, it just, the more you just play with it, and wrestling too, and especially in ECW, I kind of was, we were, how could I say this? Wrestling was so hot with the Monday Night Wars and stuff. I was just trying to stay current. And if I saw something, I would just borrow it. Like I'd like to do a little Shawn. I'd like to do a little Razor. I'd like to do a little Flair. So I was just a mishmash of guys that I admired, and just being the way Paul booked me, just being a psycho heel, just be a mean guy, and put the emotions up to 12. And that's it. It really wasn't that hard, believe it or not. Just he let you go free with it. I just had a good time, and everybody was so wonderful to work with.
It's insane that at the time, we had the internet in today's world where you can just Google anyone. But at the time, if you wanted to see a picture just incredible, you probably had to go buy a magazine. And so in these
Right.
magazines, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Just Incredible. Like that's how everyone got to see more of ECW. And your look again, you had, I believe it was like black tights underneath jean shorts, and then you had
Yes.
your top, which is usually like the Impact player shirt or your shirt in general, the kendo stick. You had the women, you had the powerhouses, you had Lance Storm. Like, the presentation for you was so as a 13-year-old kid at the time watching it, you go like, damn, I want to be him. Like, I want to act like him. He has this attitude, this swagger about him. And so seeing that look, how are you feeling about that at the time? Because ECW, third biggest company at the time, maybe even second compared to some people's opinions. And yet here you are, tag team champion, and then eventually world champion. Like, what's going through your brain during all of this?
I mean, it was wild. It was so much fun. I never would have imagined it, And really quick, it'll be a fun little story. The reason I started wearing that stuff, it wasn't planned. My first ever match in ECW, I wore the Aldo stuff because that's all I had. And then the next day, we were debuting the Justin character at the ECW arena. So back this is the 90s, everybody wore jean shorts. It was summertime. I just put on some black leggings, like one of my wife's leggings. We all wore those high-tech black boots, that Austin used to wear. We all had them on, back in those days. And Heyman just gave me an ECW shirt. So that just became the uniform. But it was all accidental. None of it was like orchestrated. Believe it or not, none of it was like orchestrated. It all just kind of happened. So yeah, that's kind of funny. But man, it was just again, it was just a wonderful time to be a wrestling fan and to be a wrestler. There was just so much great stuff happening, and I wouldn't have left ECW for all the money in the world, because we were like the cool kids. We were like punk rock. We were so cool and ahead of everyone else. You could say the Attitude Era came out of ECW, or at least some of the ideas of what we were doing with the music and with the angles and the risque stuff. So it was just a great time. We were doing great business too. So it was a lot, and the money was not that bad. I was making over $100,000 a year, working 2 nights a week, close to home. I was home a lot, so it was not a bad gig,
So you brought up the ECW money, I guess. What's the difference between the ECW money versus your Aldo Montoya money?
I made more in ECW.
Wow.
Believe it or not, yeah. Which is wild, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think.
You would think. Well, at WWE, like I said, the business was down. I was making $75,000 a year, and on the road a lot too, right? So in ECW, I'm towards the end, I was making $3,000 a week, which I think ends up like $150,000 a year. I mean, it's not like millionaire money, but don't get me wrong. Working 2 nights a week, making $3,000 a week is not a bad. You work a Friday and a Saturday. That's a great gig. And I'm doing something I love and I'm passionate about. And it was just it was perfect for me. And I didn't need to make $1 billion. I was happy doing that. I knew that if I went somewhere else, I may not get that opportunity, even though the money might be better.
And of course, your finisher was a variation of the Tombstone Pile Driver, and that's incredible. And yet, did anyone ever speak up or say something to you, being like, well, that'd be like someone doing the Stone Cold Stunner. I know Mikey Whipwreck was doing that before even Austin was using it. But like, here you are, you're using a very popular wrestler's finisher, but you're doing a variation of it. Is there ever backlash or people going, oh, you're ripping them off?
No, not at all. Not at all. And again, that also happened by accident. Because the first match where I debuted, I wrestled Jerry Lynn, which ended up being one of my guys that I feuded with historically over the title and so forth, and he beat me for the title actually. And we did it as a spot where he kicked out in our first match. I was trying to get over a spinning DDT as my finish, and I guess Paul Heyman went back and watched the tape, and he said, "PJ, don't do that. Do that tombstone. It looked really good." We did like some reversals out of it, some bridges into me having and tombstoning him. And Paul said, "That looks dope with the little corkscrew." And that just, again, accidentally, just, sometimes you can't write it as good as it, you know what I mean? You just sometimes have to notice what pops out there.
And man, at the time though, I remember it was so hard to find ECW like music because I didn't know where to find it. You had Napster, of course, and then eventually
right.
you had all these weird websites. I remember trying to figure out what your music was and what Lance Storms or Mike Awesome or Rhino. It turned into quite an event because you're using music that is not owned by ECW. So eventually when you would buy these VHS tapes or these DVDs, they didn't have a certain element of the music. But that's what made, I think, the live events.
Yes.
You'd watch it on pay-per-view and you hear the Sandman coming down to Metallica. Yeah. It was crazy. And the fans were so rabid. But again, we talked about it. ECW, though, Cyber Slam 2000 is where you become ECW World Champion. Now, how are you feeling throughout that day? And of course, how and when are you told you're going to get this championship? Because there was a lot of shit going on in ECW with Mike Awesome and Taz. And here you come in, slipping into that dirty heel, eventually getting a championship match, and you win.
I didn't find out until about halfway during the show. Believe it or not, yeah.
What?
All I noticed was my name was not on Paul would put up the list of matches, and I noticed my name is not on it, which was odd, because regardless, I would always do something, wherever. So I was like, oh my God, do I have heat? Am I something wrong here? Did I do something wrong? I'm not on the show. And so we wait, and then, maybe 15 minutes before the match goes out, Paul gets me together with everybody and kind of explains what's happening. So the only person I think that knew, we obviously, because Mike Awesome dropped the title to Taz in Indianapolis.
Yes.
And then Taz and Dreamer wrestled at the arena. And Dreamer beat Taz because Taz was on loan from the WWE at the time. And I believe then that's when I kind of came in. And, of course, you got to double-cross Tommy because Tommy can never have his glory for too long. That's just his gimmick, right? And he wouldn't want it any other way. And there came I think Francine turned heel there on Tommy, and I beat him 1, 2, 3 for the belt in an impromptu match. So, yeah, I just found out halfway through that I was going to be the world champion, which was wild,
Wow.
Yeah, I would have never thought. My first real singles title, too, ever.